You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, this is Hugh Roberts, and he's going to answer some questions for us. What do you want the world to know about you?
I think the thing most is because over here people just see, oh, white guy, American. We don't know anything about you. I think definitely something I think they should know in order to be more aware of others in the same position is, as an immigrant, I'm a bilingual Welsh speaker. English was, as a kid at the same time, 50-50, growing up and everything. And I speak the Welsh language, first language, Cymraeg iaith gynta. And growing up that way, I think it helped me learn a lot of other languages. And not so much fluently, but I can kind of get the gist of some people when they use a word between what I know in English and what I know in Welsh. So, yeah, that's helpful because when we think of immigrants, we don't always think of the European descent ones, but then also we don't think of the fact that people in Europe are not all from the same place. Just because a German person happens to be fair-skinned and a Welsh person happens to be fair-skinned and then an English person, etc., that doesn't connect us all. We're all from very different tribes within our group for however long, and that point of reference always changes depending on who's found what evidence. But yeah, being bilingual and being from a different culture that is absorbed within Britain and is officially part of England because Wales is a principality. So I grew up as a Welshman inside of Britain, but it was we're not so much ignored, but we're very often overlooked because everyone thinks of Britain as Scotland and England. They forget about Wales, and they forget there's this whole place where there's this language alive and this culture, so populated by castles. They're up there since Edward Longshanks and everything else put them in, and we live in communities that are very tight knit. But industry fell apart. People started to leave Wales. They've left in droves. A lot of them left in the early 1900s. A lot of them left in the 1800s, like to come here to Poultney. A lot of people left because they went for where the work was. The slate quarrymen that came here because they were told if you work here, you can actually buy your own house instead of living in a cottage or a house owned by the miner, the mine boss. So it's or the landlord, right? So it was a chance to be independent and form their own community with their own money and their own rights, and it was very different. So as an immigrant, I look at it the same way myself, where I find an unbelievable amount of freedom in living here, but I do miss the language. I miss being able to speak Welsh with people on a daily basis. I get most of my Welsh language stuff from YouTube videos or talking to my family once a year, whenever I can, or my wife started to learn a few words, so that's been helpful. But no, I'd really just say, speaking for myself, it's not that I want to be recognised as someone who's not what you think it is, but on behalf of others, I want to make sure that we don't overlook everyone. Remember, everybody's got something new to bring to the table, regardless, instead of generalising each other. But yeah.
Great. Thank you. What is the story of the greatest lesson you've ever learned?
Right. I'd say don't vote for idiots. Because what we tend to do is, again, similar to the generalising, we tend to label ourselves and join a group. And we'll either be, in the United States for some reason, we like to say we vote Democrat or we vote Republican. Whereas I don't vote for either of those parties. And it has nothing to do with the party itself as much as it does the candidate, etc. It's difficult. I mean, some Democratic candidates in state level, county level, all the way up to presidency I've supported. Same with Republicans. And it's not a matter of I'm one or the other. It's my wife and I, we vote Libertarian. Both of us openly admit that. I mean, we vote Libertarian because it's more of what we believe in, because we don't understand how, and I don't especially, how it's so difficult for a country as large as this with such a big population to just say you're either blue or red. That doesn't add up for this massive amount of people in the country to be one or the other. I mean, for me, we need more than two parties. And on a level where you see someone, whether they're the president, whichever president we've had, or whether they're a senator, congressperson, it's still, you have to make sure that you do vote, and you vote with your conscience, and you vote knowing you ethically are using your vote to fulfill what you believe in as a person And you should exercise that vote in that manner and not vote to stop someone that you don't like. You should vote what you believe in. So I don't think voting for another party is throwing away a vote. It's the opposite for me. I will not vote without my conscience thinking it's the right vote. And don't get me wrong, with last election, we had Gary Johnson. Gary Johnson, he did that one thing where they went, didn't know where Aleppo was. I think that was the least concern of any candidate, was the fact that he didn't know that, when the Democrats and the Republicans were both in much deeper mires as far as answers and what was going on, and all sorts of political rigmarole going on, and spin doctoring, and a lot more things going on with those candidates than there was with him. So I don't know. I think that when it comes to don't vote for idiots, it ties in with the fact that, as a lesson learned, it comes from the fact that you should always take the hardest road. You should try the hardest road, see what happens, and don't be afraid of the dark corners in your life. Go there, because we can't be safe all the time, but the best way to be safe is to check before someone else does, so that you can prevent them getting hurt, whether it's emotionally or physically or worse, right? You've always got to be the first one to step forward. You've got to be strong about it. And the same thing with your vote. Like I say, don't vote for idiots, because you've got a responsibility to yourself and to your neighbour. So voting isn't just about you half the time, obviously. It's about the greater community, the greater population. And we need to exercise sound judgment in these matters and not think about the anger and hatred that comes with it, but try and look at the commonality we all have. The Democrats and Republicans have more in common than they do apart when you really work it out. And a lot of them are very good friends, and it's very difficult for me to swallow the pill that says that I should not like someone because of the party they vote for or where they come from, because that kind of discrimination is just as bad as people are preaching that each side does to each other. So there's a phrase I heard in the college year, and I've used myself, is people are being so open-minded that they're closed. And I kind of think that's a golden rule for a lot of people to follow when it comes to our nation at the moment, is you can't say that this person's wrong and this person you don't understand when you haven't taken a deep breath and listened. And if you stay quiet enough to listen to them and do active listening, you can hear that they've got more to offer than they have to take away from you. And you can find a common ground in a lot of issues. And some issues are polarized, and that's just the way the world is. That's what separates those parties. But I don't know. We need to use our hearts just as much as we do our mouths when it comes to this stuff, maybe more. And react after you've had time to compose yourself. Don't react in a flash straight away. That's probably the lessons learned I've had, because I've jumped on board of issues and campaign beliefs and promises way too quickly and realised I was backing the wrong horse, and then straight away said, well, I'm not going to jump so quick. But yeah, don't be afraid of the dark corners that include your vote and your political opinions and people you don't agree with. Go and meet them. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Who is the most important person to you, and why?
So, I definitely say it's my wife, Colby Roberts, and it's not because she's my wife. She's just a very inspiring person, and very committed, and definitely the right person to be my life's number one. Mostly because she's my support group. She's my best friend. I can tell her everything and anything without fear of repercussion. She'll listen to me and sound off of me, and vice versa. I can listen to her. And she just inspires me, because she's so committed to everything she does, works so hard, when she's just got such a big open heart, but she's also ready to be firm when necessary and be authoritative when it's necessary. So she's friendly yet authoritative, maybe, but it's good, because she's not afraid to be hard when she has to be hard, and she's not afraid to be gentle when she has to be gentle. I'm proud of the fact that she's very physical, good at doing anything. I laugh about the fact that whenever people say, "Oh, can you help me lift this?" I'm like, "Colby, can you come and grab?" Because she's a lot more adept and stronger at a lot of things. She's very good at keeping up that physical pace these days, which I'm not. I drink too much and I've got bad shoulders, bad back, that kind of thing. But she's just that kind of person that inspires me with everything she does. She does everything to keep me in a house, keep me fed, keep me alive while I go to college, and keep me going. And she does everything to help me. When I'm having a bad day, she's the first one to reach out and sort me out and make sure I'm all right and bring me back down to earth to calm down. No, she's a very inspiring person, and I'm very proud to say she's my wife.
It's
Yeah.
very sweet. If you had one memory or piece of knowledge to pass on to the future, what would it be?
Piece of knowledge would be, I'd definitely say that don't be afraid to be born under a wandering star.
Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, there's this film, a musical, with Lee Marvin in it, called Cat Ballou. And there's a song, I was born under a wandering star, right? So my granddad used to sing that when I was a kid, my tide did. I used to think it was just a cool song, but then I realised that I've lived a life born under a wandering star, worked all over the place, never really settled down roots, emigrated with $500 in my pocket, that kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. And then, don't be afraid to be born under a wandering star, meaning don't worry about whether you've got possessions or land or anything kind of thing to hold on to. It's okay to just have your feet and walk. And it's okay to take risks, and it's okay to meet new people and travel, and it's okay to take those risks and not be afraid of what's around that next corner. So I definitely think when it comes to people in general, they like safety and stability, but there is safety and stability as well in not being tied down to anything, because obviously if there's an incident like a terrible flood or something, you don't own a house there or wherever, you can freely move, get a job somewhere else, move on, which doesn't make you part of a community as much because you're obviously leaving it. But I think more what I mean is you've just got to be able to be free. It's okay to be free, and it's okay not to be tied down by anything or anyone or have any issues with it. Back to my wife, actually, we've got this way of living where, we could move tomorrow. We could just change our plan tomorrow. We're both okay with that. That's part of it as well, where you don't have to have a solid plan. But having a plan obviously is helpful for stability and everything else, but it's okay not to have one as well, and it's okay to experience different things. It's okay to meet different people, It's okay to live different places. It's okay to experience everything, negative and positive. It's okay to be born under a wandering star. But that's the lesson, I think. It's just don't be tied down by what society tells you to do. Get a mortgage, have 2.4 kids, get a middle class education. Don't do any of that. Have a laugh with your day. Enjoy it while you physically can before you retire, because when you retire you can be too broke to do anything with it. So, and I don't mean financially, I mean physically, you'll be too broke. So get out there and have a laugh while you still can. Don't take things so serious. Yeah.
I love it. That's great. What is your greatest memory?
Right. So, when I was a kid, I had a cousin who was in the British Army. And off he goes. In his uniform, the whole thing, and off he goes. And it was the early 80s. And I remember my grandfather saying that this war, no Welsh soldier should fight in because we are related to Welsh people settled in Patagonia in South America. And the war I'm talking about is the Falklands War.
Could you elaborate a little bit on the situation that he was going into?
Yeah, so I think, I can't remember the time frame because I was so young, but it was a few months earlier that everything had started, where Argentina and Britain were having problems with who had possession of the Falkland Islands, or Las Malvinas, as Argentina refers to it. And they sent in commandos and navy ships and took the Falklands from the British for a short time, and then the British came back and took it back. Well, he was going off to that war, and my grandfather saying that was probably when I realised that the world is bigger than I think it is, and that also the fact that there are Welsh people living in Patagonia. It's a colony of Methodist Welsh people, I believe, that went off there to have religious freedom quite some time ago. I'm not sure of when, but I just remember this is an important part to him. And when he said that, I thought, wow, so there are Argentinians that have Welsh names and even understand some of the language, just like the Poultney story a little. Oh, it's just fascinating to me. And then I was like, well, why is he going? Well, there's no choice. You're a soldier, you go. So, yeah, that memory and seeing it on television. I remember seeing a British newscaster showing a ship burning in the bay. between, because it's a cluster of islands, burning where they started to offload troops and equipment. And it was the Sir Galahad, and the Welsh Guards were aboard it. And there was like 50 plus guardsmen killed from this French exocet, because France gave them the missiles because they wanted Argentina to do all right. And the whole story goes that the British military somehow managed to get hold of American Stingers, and that story's a little clouded, but I don't think it's a coincidence that Reagan and Maggie were best mates at the time, right? Working with each other on bringing Russia down. So, no, it's an interesting time of the world and time of life. The Berlin Wall was still up, hadn't come down yet. So the world was a very different place. And then we had this really strong sense of patriotism flooded Britain because of it. Everyone was supporting Britain's claim to it because we just had a huge drawdown in the budget where the military was underfunded. Well, because of that, they were going over on cruise ships like the QE2, Cunard Shipping's cruise ship. And there was images of these soldiers just sitting on the deck where people used to pay big money to hang out on lawn chairs in nice weather, sitting there with their weapons, sharpening equipment and getting ready. And it really stuck with me because when the war had ended and they raised the Union Jack in Stanley, it was over quickly. But the stories went on for years about what they went through and everything else. They made a couple of mini-series on BBC and things, right? And I was just fascinated by why it happened. And I think because it was my earliest experience of a war for the sake of land and people and the defence of the people of the Falklands and their home, which before that there was Argentinians living there was British people living there. They were kind of amicable, but what it was over was just, I couldn't understand it at that time because I was only 6 at the time. So it was really strong memory for me. It still is, because it's kind of defined probably why I became a soldier a little as well, because it's difficult to consider that experience of someone else without going through it. And I really, as a young person, wanted to understand that experience and see what he'd gone through and why and what this was about. Because we're getting reports of people getting killed, obviously, in action there and things like that. Other stories came out of there, not all good. And then it just stuck with me. It goes back to a lot of things I bring up sometimes where I talk about you need to understand other people and give them a chance to speak. Well, they weren't talking about what happened to them. The people experienced it. So I realized, unless I don't serve, I'm not going to understand what they're talking about. And it was a really, life-changing experience seeing that. And it tied in with a couple of years earlier when there was an embassy siege in London on the Iranian embassy. And out of nowhere, you just saw these crazy little shadows going down on ropes, blowing windows, running through a building. And within minutes, they got rid of all the people that were holding people hostage, and they were out the door and off in a helicopter. It was like, what's going on right here, you know? That's not where I live. I go play in the playground and drink water at home and have tea and with my parents. And it was just odd. You know, it really felt removed. But it was at a time, too, where World War II had happened, and people in my family and people who used to come over, they were in that. And it was only 45 plus years ago. So they were still in their 60s, 70s and quite young, enough to remember everything. But I never got to ask them. Never got to really talk to them about it, and they didn't talk about it. You just hear stories about successes like digging for victory, growing gardens at home, trying to support the war effort. You'd hear about how the community came together. You didn't really hear from the people that had to go into Europe itself to fight, or that kind of experience. You heard more from the home effort, what happened with the people left behind, what they did. They talked freely about it, and they talked about how they pulled together, because it was a golden time for them as well, in that sense that the whole of Britain had pulled together on it. And it was kind of like that Falklands experience for me, though very short. It was interesting to see British flags on the street, and that is no different to me than the experience of 9/11, when all of a sudden American flags were out in front of houses again, en masse. That's why it's an important memory for me. It's my first experience of boom in patriotism as a result of an act of aggression, where people pull together in the hard times. So yeah.
Along the lines of the people that you never got to ask, could you maybe share, if you feel comfortable, some of the things that you wish they were able to share with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people have a problem with talking about traumatic things. I really try to talk about things instead of keeping them myself anymore, because it might be helpful for someone to hear my story or hear what I've gone through, so that they realize there's something we all have in common and that you're not alone. Well, I definitely would like to have asked them what it felt like, what they experienced, But I'd like to know what they thought about when it came to their families when they left, because they didn't expect that to happen. It was an overnight event that brought loads of people onto ships to go, and it was very quick and different time. And it was, I think I would have asked questions about what they thought of to get them through it, what they thought of about the incident itself, whether they thought it was worth their life or whether they went because they were ordered. Because, you hear a lot of stuff about Afghanistan and Iraq and the war for oil type conversation, and honestly, I don't remember seeing any of that stuff. I remember seeing government self-interest groups from both sides going out there and trying to argue for minerals and oil rights and stuff, but not soldiers in uniform. Now, if that's not true, I don't know any different. But that's part of it too, is at the time I wanted to know. I wanted to understand it. I wanted to unfold. I wanted to have an explanation for this, because this wasn't something that was played lightly on me. I was told flat out, he might not come back. And it was like, oh. And he wasn't the only one, of course. There was lots of people went. But it was a difficult time for me to understand, because I had a grandparent that had just passed on my dad's side. Well, didn't go to the funeral because they didn't want me to understand the life and death question at the time. But then this was shoved upon you where people are dying. Well, what's death? So there was a lot of things coming out when I was with this event. It prompted a lot of questions that is comparable to a lot of people with 9/11 and everything else over here. So yeah, it's definitely a deep, long question, because what would you ask? I mean, seriously, what would you ask if somebody told you, I'm on my way and I might not come back? Because with my wife, we weren't worried about me not coming back. Don't worry about it. I'll see you in 9 months. That kind of thing. But, of course, there's a risk. There's always a risk. There's a risk when you leave your house, obviously. And it's not like, I don't know. It's not like people have any misconceptions. A war is a war, but it didn't have the same home impact as World War II did. So Britons as a whole felt safe for being involved in that one, I think, because they weren't getting bombed like they were by the Nazis. But, being to London, even worked there for a while, and it had new buildings, new from the end of the 40s buildings, where old buildings used to be. So the scars are still there. You can still see what happened. It's really strange to grow up in a place like that. But the question's really, it's just, I've got the answers now from my own experience, but I didn't know what to ask them. I didn't even know what to think. I just never understood it. And I wonder if there was a way that someone could actually sat down and explain it to me. But at the time, there was that culture of, we don't talk about these things.
Well, yeah. Now that you have the answers, would you like to share anything about your experiences?
Yeah, I'd say that you can't fear being passionate and being patriotic. Just be patriotic for your own reasons. Don't be patriotic because somebody told you to. There's many reasons to be patriotic and feel a sense of duty to a nation. I emigrated here and then joined the army here in the United States. I am proud to say that I was in the military, and I'm very proud to say that I was an infantryman in the US Army. But it's not for selfish reasons. It's more for, well, you've got so many people out there that don't even realize that people are standing out there right now willing to give their life for you. Well, of course we are. But when you don't, that's what's hard. When it doesn't happen to you. When you come home and your friend didn't from basic. That's the weird part. That's the part that hits you. Especially because you trade with them. Because they're younger, they've got a really awesome family and a good chance of having a family themselves and going forward. And then you got grandpa private, this kind of thing. He should have traded. He had more life to live. We couldn't have. It doesn't work like that. So that survivor guilt feeling you get because you like your mate, No, it's difficult because do you regret it was a question I was asked by a student before getting spat on in my first semester. Do you feel ashamed of yourself? And it wasn't in a friendly way. And now, I was asked that same phrase pretty much by someone else where it didn't go hostile, but I was asked the same thing the second time, and I got spat on for it. Oh, it's easy. If you look at the kids' faces, and the non-combatants in Afghanistan's faces when they realise that they're not under any pressure to be under a certain rule and a way of living, that they got more choice, it's worth it. It's definitely worth it, because it's not about you is the key. It's about everyone else. It's about you doing the right thing and make sure everyone else has those free choices and those ideals. Now, don't think for a minute that I'm saying we should give democracy to people freely and say, here you go, here's democracy, you're going to love it. What works for people, and works for different cultures is what works for them. We don't need to impose anything. They need to make their own choices. That's the whole point of freedom. If they choose to be under Sharia law, then they choose as a nation. That's fine, but they shouldn't be forced a choice. It's the choice that they don't have. And then things like voting. Some countries, they don't want to vote. They don't want to mess around making those decisions. They just want to run their house, do their thing. That's it. They don't want what we've got. They're not interested in it. And I understand that. It's not fascinating to them to have this free will of democracy when it comes to politics, because politics isn't appealing. They're not bothered with it. Whoever's running it, if they're running it right, they're good to go. They don't want to get involved unless they have to get involved in that side, because they're too busy making decisions that affect whether their family eats, right on the ground, right where they are. And it's definitely a more complex issue than people portray it as. But I've found it funny when people have never been there, and people have definitely never been there as a service member, try and tell me how it is and what we did there and why we were there. That's hilarious. You know? You tell me we were there for this, there for that. Resources. Right. Okay. I'm glad I didn't see you there, because it would have been a problem, because you'd have probably been sent somewhere else for some other reason, or, I don't know, discharged for failure to adapt, by the way it had gone, because it's not the truth unless you see it with your own eyes. And I've seen what I've seen with my eyes, and I know what I believe because I've seen it, not because I've been told it. And obviously things go on you don't know about, but as a whole, I think the answer I've got really is that your life and everyone else's life is worth mine. It's worth putting yourself in the line of fire for the betterment of your culture, your society, your nation, in every respect, and that everyone whose feet are on US soil is safe and safer for it. So yeah.
So still along those lines, why did you enlist?
So, when 9/11 happened, I was working as a bailiff, Crown Enforcement stuff in Britain. And when it happened, somebody told me it happened, and I was like, whatever. I didn't really believe it. I thought it was some kind of, like a late April Fool, some Hollywood director trying to promote a film, that this was a fake news story, not in reference to how we use that term today, that it was just some kind of advertisement. Then I realised it was on every channel. Then I realised it was real, and I'm like, why the heck would somebody fly a plane in? And then the second one, I'm like, this is not a coincidence. And then hours later, of course, there's pictures of people on the television and the amount of deaths, and then everyone that they've lost, and the towers have collapsed. And then they're saying that they believe it's a cell called Al-Qaeda, and that it's Osama bin Laden, and this kind of thing. And I just remember feeling that the US has to react to this. So if I'm going to get this soldier experience, this is the time to do it. And off I went. It took me a minute to figure everything out, but I got on a plane, figured out my immigration, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I didn't necessarily feel that draw as much either straight away, because I was in America, everything was shiny and different. But it was always in my head that I want to join this army, I want to get in this army, and it took me almost 8-9 years to get in. So by the time I got in, I was already an old private. So I knew that I couldn't do 30 years, I could only do 20, if I was lucky. But then the IED we were in affected my hearing so much in Afghanistan that I couldn't stay in, and I managed to stay in a little longer than I should have, I guess. But when I did another test of my hearing, they said I couldn't even reclass at the time, so that was my military career over, I'd still be there. But I did it for those reasons. I did it because I was passionate. I did it because that day it affected me just like Falklands did as a kid. But I felt like it was a fight worth fighting, that one. And I only ever went to Afghan. I didn't go to Iraq. And then I went to Africa and East Africa Reaction Force for the last deployment, which was still under Operation Enduring Freedom. And I'm proud of everything we did as a group, whether it was the battalion, the brigade, or the division, or any of that. It was a group effort, and everybody worked hard, and we all had a goal to achieve. And I'm very proud of every member of our unit, everyone. Yeah. So, I think I was 19. I don't know, 20. Anyway, it was 22 years ago or more. So I was in the town of Newport, South Wales, and I had these crazy mates, We used to go out for pints and whatnot. And one night after the bar closed and everything, my buddy had a couple of drinks at his house, and I was having a whiskey. He filled a coffee cup with whiskey, and he said, "I bet you can't down it, puke it up, and drink it again." So I did. Downed it, managed to fill the cup back up with vomit and whiskey, and got it in me again, and then I blacked out. Right?
God.
Anyway, so he had this crazy idea that we should get on a train and go to southwest Wales, where Swansea is, and get on a ferry and go to Ireland and whatnot. So apparently I missed out on that. So drunk off my head, I decided to go on my own some months later and do the trip. So I started off again by getting smashed. And by the time I sobered up, I was in Spain. Yeah. So I managed to go through all it was EU, so it wasn't like they cared about the passport as much as they cared about your EU, right? And I had it on me. Mm-hmm. But I really don't remember. But I know I went to Ireland because I had some Irish punts in my pocket before they went to the Euro. And I know I was in Spain because that's where I sobered up. Yeah. Wow. And I know it took me a few days because the ticket from Newport to the ferry out in Southwest Wales had the time and date on it, and I'm like, huh. And then I'm in France trying to find my way back, and I don't know what happened to me. This whole country I was too drunk to remember.
Oh my gosh.
And another one I sobered up halfway through my visit. Yeah.
Just because I think it's important for the audience to know, can you tell us how much you normally drink when you go to the Legion?
Yeah, okay, so it's not a matter of I drink a lot. It's a matter of I just like a drink. Mm-hmm. And there's days I don't drink, there's weeks I don't drink. But when I go for a pint, I go for a pint. So normally I'll, whether it's a Legion, a VFW or anywhere, I'll sit there as long as they'll let me without telling me I've had enough. So because I don't seem to look any different from pint 1 to pint 12, I can sit there for 2 pints an hour for like 8 hours. Yeah, at least. Probably more than 2. But yeah, it's not a matter of that. It's just sometimes I need some social and not be in the house and not just see my wife every day and not just go to class. So I'll go out and have my pints. When I have my pints, I like to be around people, and they'll tell me their stories, tell me their jokes, tell me their silliness that's going on. And it's always great because it's a different story, it's a different viewpoint, it's a different experience. For example, I'm at Green Mountain College and all I hear is the blue side of the opinions. Mm-hmm. And then I go to the Legion and I hear blue and red. And it's like, oh, that's nice. It's a change. It's more balanced because it represents the community, not just one type and one methodology of thinking, one ideology. I'm getting to experience a little more. So yeah, no, I'll drink my face off quite well. But yeah.
What's the most you've ever done? Was it that trip?
No.
Oh
No.
boy.
No.
I'm glad I asked this.
No, yeah. It's not that we drink a lot, but when we drink, we have a drink.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. No, I've definitely gone over like 30 pints in a day.
Oh.
Yeah. And it's nothing to be proud of. I know I'm laughing, but I've definitely gone over 30 pints in a day easily. Because some people have hobbies. Mm-hmm. Getting some pints in me, being social is my hobby. For other people, it's like really interesting stuff. But for me, no, it's having pints and just being silly and listening to the jokes and having a laugh with people. And yeah. But I've drank a lot in my time. But I definitely slowed down on avoid liquor now. Just stay with beer. Mm-hmm. But I went to a Red October socialist worker party thing in Britain when I lived there, and that was when I was living around Newport as well. I drank so much vodka. I won't drink vodka anymore. I can't. I've overloaded. And then when I was getting divorced from my second wife, I went to this bar in San Diego, and I think I drank all the Jägermeister. All of it. Like, because he had that chiller machine. It was I can't remember where it was. And then downtown. Anyway, I go in there, And I had so much to drink that a friend of mine came to get me at 2 a.m. to see where I was, because I didn't really use a cell phone much then, so it wasn't like now where you just start messaging easily.
Mm-hmm.
He found me and he said that he couldn't see the colour of my eyes because all he could see was my pupils that large. I was like, oh. And he said that there was like Jaeger just dribbling out of my mouth. I'm like, really? Because I can't drink that anymore either.
Yeah.
So those are the 2 liquors I think I've drank to the point where I can't drink anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was
Wow.
pretty bad. But when I had my... Yeah, I went down in the field and they said I had a pulmonary embolism. And then I had to go on blood thinners and I was pulled out of the field on field training in the army. My squad leader at the time, he comes over and he's like, all right, I'm going to get you home now, and I'm out of the hospital. And then I go straight down the pub like I do. Because I'm like, I almost bloody died. I'm going to go have a beer. And he comes in there to get me because he's responsible for me and I'm just not listening.
Mm-hmm.
And I was drinking my face off again. And then he said, I'm coming to get you and I'm taking you to my house and I'm going to make sure you don't do anything stupid. And you shouldn't be drinking because you've been on these bloody blood thinners. And yeah, the whole time he was trying to get me out of there, I kept ordering gin and tonics because I thought it would get me drunk quicker. And I was just smashing them. I got like 5 in like 10 minutes while he was trying to doubles and everything, But no, I've always been a bit silly when it comes to that stuff, but only because I like to have a laugh. Because, like I said, going on deployment, not drinking for 9 months, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
Working on fishing boats, not drinking, no problem. Going anywhere, not drinking, no problem. But it's my hobby. I have a pint when I have a day off, and I have a laugh, and I do silly shit, pretty much. But I never, and you shouldn't drink that much in any one go. You shouldn't. Never going to advocate that anyone should do what I do. But I do it because that's me, and that's what I do. And I do it because I choose to. Other people do legalized substances. Other people do illegal substances. I like to have my pint. And really, I don't really cause any harm to anyone want to do. And that's really the key, is I don't cause harm to others. So I never get angry or violent when I've had a beer. None of that. I'm just a happy guy. So I don't really... If I was harming other people by doing it, I wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, now and again, though, I'll go nuts and have a crazy day, which is nice. But I'll feel it for weeks. Didn't used to. It was great. I was bulletproof. Not anymore.
There's a story you told me a while ago that I just remembered. It's like a lieutenant, and there was a bar, and there was an island in the middle of the street, and his house was like on the other side of the street. It was like a 2-lane. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do know what you're talking about.
Could you tell that story?
This was a friend of mine, and he was in the Vietnam War, and he was a Navy guy, and he got a job, and obviously enlisted in the Navy, didn't get a job, wrong way to say it. Anyway, so he worked for an officer, and across from where he worked, there was like a couple of roads, a little grass verge strip like you see in the dual carriageways in America. You see that, On the other side, there was a bar, and he'd go in there and drink Ouzo root beers. And Ouzo root beers were like Ouzo halfway up the glass, and then beer halfway up the glass. A quarter of it would be Ouzo, and the other quarter would be a splash of root beer. And they were like 48-ounce glasses, and he'd have 3 of those, and he'd get so schmammered that he'd wake up in the middle of this verge in Australia just in the morning. It's like, what, And he'd only have 3, and they'd kill him. Oh my god. Yeah, so most of my friends like a pint, obviously, too, because that's where I meet people.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Yeah, yeah, he was a pretty good lad. I miss him. He lives in California. Yeah. The weirdest place I worked was, I got a Class A license and drove truck for a bit. The people you'd meet going across the states, going to different places, getting different runs was just absolutely insane. Like, I went to Reno, Nevada, and we pulled into this truck stop, me and a team driver. We were on our way to Sacramento, doing doubles and triples, so we were dropping a trailer because we couldn't do 3 in California, only 2. So off we go, and we pull into this truck stop. I go use the restroom like you do, and then out of nowhere, I'm like, there's a pile of guns in here in a glass room, like with the shells and whatever. It was Elvis's gun collection. Right. So if I hadn't driven the truck, I would never have realised that's there, right? So I walked in there, there's stuff, John Wayne stuff's in there from that Elvis owned, right? It was a really crazy, odd thing to have in a truck stop. So that was one of the weird things I've seen with the job. And then there was stuff like, was it the world's largest prairie dog in Kansas? Yeah, that kind of weirdness. Like, it was just... When I was in Arizona, I stopped at the petrified forest
Mm-hmm.
and got to see all these, like, sections of fossilized tree or however it works. It was just fascinating. And then there's this big meteor impact down from it. You know, weird stuff like that. And then the people. Oh my God, I've seen some weird people doing that job. Pulled up to this bar in Northern California because I was doing a team drive there and we needed to reset our hours. We stopped and went into the bar. I won't say the name of it, but we go in the bar. I'm not kidding. This lady comes up to me and says to me, "I like your accent. Do you want to fuck?" And I was like, "No, I'm good." And she's like, "How about your buddy?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. He's probably good." And then by the time I drank my beer, I could see outside the truck was shaking. I'm like, Jesus, what's going on here? These people are a little, you know. And I've never been afraid of being forward and having a laugh, but it was. I hadn't even had my first beer properly. I was not ready for this kind of immersion. And then, going up to places like Oregon and Washington State, seeing all the people there and all the craziness going on in certain people's lives, because for some reason, I don't know if it's because they know you can drive a truck and you're parked in a truck when you walk into a place on a reset, or you're at a truck stop, but people feel fine telling you stuff because they'll never see you again. So you'd have all sorts of people telling you weird shit stories about their day. People trying to con you out of money because they knew you were just coming through and you might fall for the sob story. I pulled over one time coming out of Colorado because this truck was over on the side of the road and clearly it slid off. So I stopped with my doubles and I started to pull my chains out to try and help them out. And I went up to the cab loudly and at a distance because I didn't want to scare anyone. And the lady came out with a revolver telling me flat out if I come any nearer she'll kill me. And I was like, well, I'm not trying to hurt you. I'll just pull you out. She's like, no, I've got people coming. I was like, all right. But those kind of things you don't expect to happen in your day. I'm going to do the right thing. No, you're not. Yeah. But stuff like that. And then there was, there's some funny stuff up on the road. Oh, we used to go get pies in this one diner, me and my co-driver. And that was like the only normal routine. Whenever we got a chance, we'd stop at this one place. I can't remember the name of it. I can't remember what city it was in. But it was just nice. And I don't even eat pie or sweet stuff, really. But this was like a nice reset moment. But it was also weird because they remembered us every time we came in. And we probably only went there 8 times total the whole time I was driving on this job. But it was nice to see this reset. And then they knew our names the second time. And they were just welcoming. It was like almost going home, just going in this little diner. And then down in Texas, we went into this place to eat in Lubbock. And it was fantastic. There's no real menu. They're just giving you what they got. And it was biscuits and gravy. And I never had that before. I'm smashing it in me and I'm like, this is great, but we got to get on the road and I'm drinking my coffee. And then the doors open up inside this, we thought it was a diner. It wasn't, it was a church. We were in a church hall. It was Sunday, it was service, and they didn't charge us. We just left a donation. They just said no problem when we walked in and they fed us.
Wow.
Yeah, there's little good things like that happen too, like very nice moments. And yeah, driving places and just seeing really cool people. Driving in mental weather, like stuff that scare the pants out of you. And when you've got 80,000 pounds total going down the road, it'll worry you. But it was really fascinating. Like I got to see Vail, Colorado, a couple of times going through Eisenhower Tunnel and the summit going into Denver. And you'd see like on the Vail side, it was crazy weather and things were just going nuts and snow's falling hard. As soon as you got through the tunnel, it was almost clear on the other side and you didn't need your chains anymore. And that was just in a few miles because of the way the mountain system works. They got to meet a lot of good people though. I think one of the best things about driving the truck was the fact that I got to see the country without paying for it, instead getting paid for it in a lot of ways. But it was definitely a weird job because there was some times when, you go take a shower and someone will come up to you and say stuff like, we can save money and I'll give you half of the shower and we'll both just go in there and switch out. And I'm like, never met this person, but apparently they're okay with seeing my hairy backside right now. But the things that, if it was in Europe, I wouldn't be surprised. But I was surprised over here because, it's a little more conservative when it comes to views about those kind of things here. But no, it was definitely a weird job. Very weird. You'd have to lock your doors because they had these sex workers that are called lot lizards that would bang on your door. So you had to actively put a note in your window saying, nope, don't bother. It was, kind of odd in some places. And then, what was it? Yeah, we used to stop in Nevada sometimes, Arizona, whatever. But Vegas, we stopped once. we didn't spend our 24-hour reset there ever again. Because I was sitting there, didn't know how to play blackjack, but apparently I did by the end. I was having a good day. And I had $150. I went home with money in my pocket to the truck. I was like, what the hell? But yeah, no, it was crazy good job, but really weird because of the people. And then you notice things like in Missouri, whole different group. You know, and state by state, there was a whole change in the dynamic of people. And it was really fascinating stuff. I went to a bar one time where the locals told me not to go in because it's full of African Americans. And white people don't go in there. And I'm like, bullshit. In I go, and obviously I was fine. And I had a bunch of Guinness, and I was a very happy lad. And I didn't know what the hell they were talking about. But it was obviously the way the local dynamic worked. And that surprised me. It really did. It still surprises me that people do that. People have those conceptions about each other in different groups that they shouldn't interact or it was a problem. And then so, yeah, it was a weird job, and I got to meet some people with very extreme views, one side or the other, for the good and the bad. It was a very eye-opening job. Yeah.
So, just out of curiosity, what did you do to like stay awake and stay entertained while you were driving?
Well, I drank my fair share of coffee, obviously. But the truck stops would sell like certain types of food, so I'd try and aim at stuff that was immediate energy, high protein, things like that, instead of like carb loading or whatever, because you're sitting, so it's not really a good job to have carb loads.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I did gain quite a bit of weight doing that job, and then it took me a minute to lose it. But yeah, it wasn't really anything else, because you had a big responsibility driving that much weight. Couldn't mess around. Like if I was on a 24-hour reset, first 8 hours, I'd have a beer. But that rest of the 24, nothing. No joke, no reason, no excuse. Just can't do it.
So
but yeah.
What would you do during the rest of the 24 hours?
Oh, the reset?
Yeah.
Well, we'd catch up on rest because that was the whole point of the reset. And then just go see stuff around where we are. If we park somewhere, we try and park somewhere intentionally where we could go do something.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes just near a mall so that we could go buy new pants if we need it or whatever else we needed. Those kind of things. Or there's somewhere good to eat that we figured out or we've heard of, or some other trucker told us, oh, you're going through such and such, don't forget to stop here. And then that was a lot of it too. Like most of the times people would recommend a place based on the diner, based on a place like the one in Van Horn, Texas. It was also the scene in this film, The Three Burials of Melquiades Estrada, with Tommy Lee Jones, made a while ago. Because I remember going in there and going, why the fuck is this place purple? The whole thing was like Kansas Wildcats, K-State purple, that almost pinkish purple colour, and I'm like, this is odd. You know, like what a weird, vibrant colour for a small diner. And it turns out they painted it for the film, and I only realised that a year too late when I saw the film. It's like, I've eaten there. I had really good chicken fried steak, that kind of stuff. But that's the other weird stuff you see on the routes. It was interesting. But I got to go places I'd never seen. That was really cool about it. I've definitely not lived a peaceful life on a personal level or a work level. I've always tried to be settled and be quiet and be reasonable, but there's definitely triggers from things that have happened that have stayed with me and kept me this way. But like, it wasn't until my wife now, Colby, that I could be a good lad and behave myself and be all good and be reasonable about everything and not be a lunatic about half the stuff. And yeah, because I like my pint, like I said, but before I wouldn't go home. I'd go drinking all night, stay on a buddy's couch. I don't know what it was. I couldn't be happy. I was very self-destructive, burning bridges, couldn't be happy. I always felt like, I should just screw this up on purpose. This shouldn't be going well for me. I should make these mistakes. But then actually when I enlisted in the army is when I changed everything about myself and opinion on it. And I did improve, but it was a teething process as well, obviously. But I tried to live a better way, but it was very difficult for me to be a functional member of society. It was very difficult to me to accept other people and to accept their ways. I grew up being angry about things for no reason, and then I was a teenager, and then as a young adult I was very angry. I was angry all the time. I get in fights on purpose, all that kind of stuff. Had my ass kicked a lot more times than I've won. And I mean fighting, not just a verbal expression of ass kicked. I mean, yeah, actual ass kickings. So, no, I'm definitely, the lessons I learned there were very harshly learned, but they were learned that way because I put myself in those positions, intentionally antagonizing people, trying to set myself up to be in that situation because I felt like I deserved the kicking. And I don't know why I had so much self-hate for myself. I still can't figure it out. It's one of the big questions I have. But being in the military helped me a lot, helped me calm down. Coming here to Green Mountain College in Poultney actually helped me a lot because I have to really hold myself in, not just speak as I really feel and believe in a lot of issues, because I don't want to hurt anyone and their beliefs and their feelings, because they deserve the right to peace. They don't need me being upset about something or being aggressive about what I believe, because that's how I express myself. I don't express myself gently. I express myself a little aggressively sometimes. Well, yeah, because I'm passionate about it and I get all pissed off and I start. But I'm not going to hurt anyone. I just come across sounding that way, so it's hard, and I don't want anyone else to feel that. It's my bag of crap to carry, and I'm carrying it. I don't want anyone else to deal with it. But it's difficult because you got to see it from two sides of the coin to a point, right? And all this kind of thing. Or I don't know. You've got to have a level head. That people tell you all these expressions to deal with dealing with different opinions, but half the time I'm just frightened that people really firmly believe everything they're spoon-fed, and they believe their source is genuine and the other people isn't. That doesn't add up to me. You don't make up your own mind, then you're in trouble. And you've got to make up your own mind based on every fact, not just the facts that is popular for you to believe if you're in a certain ideology and group. You've got to look at everything. Like I read BBC News, I read CNN stories, I read Fox stories, I read France 24 stories, I even read RT sometimes, if it's available, because certain internet providers don't like you seeing RT anymore. I'm like, kidding me? When the Crimean Peninsula was going on and Russia was coming in there, or whichever the story, the apparent, right? Because who knows? We went there. But we know what the news tells us. I was watching all of it, and it was amazing how vastly different everybody was. So that tells me right there, you got to pick your sources and then make your own mind up. But it's just difficult, yeah. Very difficult to keep my mind settled with this stuff. And people find it easy to say that one viewpoint's right. And I can see it. It's less confusing to just believe one way of thinking. It's less confusing, makes life easier. You know who to hate, you know who to love. And that's the thing too. It's hate. It's all hate. Doesn't matter if you're blue or red. You're hating the other these days. And that's really bloody sad. It shouldn't be that way. It should be okay to be different politically. It should be okay to be different as an individual. It should be okay. But it's not. We're persecuting each other beyond belief. When we like putting labels on ourselves so that we can persecute that label. Because that's the other thing. It's not you standing up and saying you're proud. You're giving someone that doesn't agree with you a label to target. As well as you're, being proud and saying it's okay to be open about who you are. You're also painting a target in your back, which is good or bad. That's not my place to say. But it hurts my feelings because I know that you're being manipulated when it comes to labeling. And the hard part I'm bringing up about that is, for example, if you say even that you're Christian, there are groups that are persecuting Christians in this country, let alone worldwide. So it's not about the gender conversation. It's not about political conversation. It's about all of it. We're just so busy trying to hurt each other that we're forgetting that united we stand, right? Divided we fall. We forget it all the time. But we're so busy bringing ourselves down and destroying our own communities from the inside by getting angry about issues that we should legitimately be angry about. But there's another way to deal with it. Instead of dividing a community, you got to bring it together. And by taking the stance we are, and as firmly as we are, we're not making it welcoming enough for the other argument to come in and meet a mutual ground where we can understand where each other's coming from and discuss it out and talk it out and find the right solution that's amicable and can work for all. Way too busy trying to be the better than the other person and trying to one-upmanship this stuff, and it's just not right. It's not right at all. But yeah, the life I've lived of my own choice, the way I have, has definitely led me to that conclusion from experiencing different people in different cultures and different countries and then coming up to a rounded up opinion. I've still got a lot to learn, a lot of people to meet to form more opinions and figure more out. Of course they do. No one knows everything. They bloody don't. The whole point of feeling wise, I think, in a sense, is realizing that you know nothing. Not that you know everything. You don't. No one does. So it's difficult to say, but I definitely believe it's the most important thing in the world for people to start finding out what they have in common each other instead of what they have against each other, so that we can start figuring this stuff out before it gets to beyond the boiling point it already is, because we are on a boiling point. We are at a crisis stage, and we need to get there before this happens, because the system we have may not be the best system, but this system can and does work if we come back and try and reset it to a point where we can move forward united. When we can find a way to do that, make everybody feel like their voice is heard. It doesn't mean that their points are the valid ones, because obviously hate speech has no place anyway, but it means that we could come to a point where we can find a common ground where we can agree this is the best solution for the majority, for all, not for a select group. Yeah, there's my life lessons learned, definitely. It's that part when it comes to what I've done and why I've done it. And honestly, being so angry with my life and the way I was and myself, and being very self-hating on a lot of things, was definitely the key to me now seeing things with a much calmer viewpoint, broader viewpoint. And obviously my wife Colby has been that stability and point of focus. She's the lighthouse in the storm, pun intended, because she's from Maine and she's from the coast, so you know, she's that lighthouse in the storm for me. She keeps me on a good heading, and that's helped because she's experienced a lot, and her story added to mine is where I've got a full story. But myself on my own, I don't have that. But with Colby, I have a full story, and we make sense. We both experienced extremes of each, and we both experienced bad things that have happened to us without our own reason for it to happen. It happened, and we've both seen some silly shit out there, and we've talked to some crazy good people and some crazy bad people, right? But we both said right now, even we don't know what's going on in this country, and it's difficult, and it's got nothing to do with are you aiming your anger at a certain thing or a government, or it seems to be very individual in a lot of cases. So we don't seem to be discussing anything. We're just shouting at each other, and that's not good. We got to find a way to communicate. We have to. It's very clear that communication, although it is obvious to a lot of people we need to communicate, and I'm saying something obvious, it's a skill we've lost because we're too busy texting and using social media to communicate, where we do it in a second or two from a news story breaking out and flash response. Take a deep breath for 30 minutes or an hour. When we used to read nothing but newspapers and watch it on the TV, because they were around obviously when I was a kid. We didn't have Facebook and stuff and smartphones. We do now, and I've used them for almost half of my life. No, when they came out, 2007, who knows?
Yeah.
All right, so not half, so a quarter of it. But we used to read the newspaper, get angry at the story. You're still in the house having your cup of tea and your breakfast, and then by the time you left the house, you'd calm down enough to not upset about the issue, but to then have a reasoned, rational response to it instead of an angered, emotional response. Well, today I can hear a story right now, get angry, get on the phone, and send it out into the world, my feelings. We don't have that pause, a buffer, to take a deep breath, be rational, and come up with a rational conversation that the other side can hear. We're just too emotional about it, too angry. There's only one way to communicate, and that's that everybody feels respected and heard. And that doesn't happen when we're emotional. We're emotional that first couple of seconds when we respond. Just like an argument you have with someone face to face. Well, yeah, people need to take a breather before they respond to something, and then do it rationally and make your point clear instead of emotional, because it also devalues your opinion. It takes away from what you're really trying to say because nobody wants to hear it, because you come off angry and you start accusing and hating and saying how much you are angry at this person or this issue, instead of just relaxing and saying, look, I disagree with this because of this, and a good informed response is all I'm saying. And I think that's happened because of technology too. We've got too quick. We're too easy for us to be quick with it, instead of just thinking about it.